So my name is Dulari. I have been working in social impact communications for most of my career, which is now about 15 years. We have been thinking a lot about social impact. That's just like a royal we. It's just me in my business. But I've been thinking a lot about social impact from the perspective of being industry agnostic. So my business, which I started about 3 years ago during the pandemic, because that seemed like a great idea at the time, to start something in chaos and see what happens. But the idea that I had was, a lot of folks who are working in communications really focus in one lane of social impact. They do primarily nonprofit communications or primarily corporate social responsibility communications or primarily philanthropic communications or in academia. And I didn't want to have any of those sort of labels on what I do because I think that to make true social impact, we need a lot of different things happening at the same time to address a lot of different problems. So that remains true and is true of my client base. It sort of spans that entire industry sort of set of labels. And I think that all of this is really because of all of the different sort of career hats that I've worn, all of which I was very passionate about at the time that I was doing them, but eventually felt like there had to be something else that could solve a different kind of problem. So I've worked in government, I've worked in philanthropy, I've worked in nonprofit, I've worked in academia. And so all of those things, I think, sort of informed what I call like a pretty broad lens, but I also like to go really deep. So when I'm working with my clients, I try to get as informed as possible about what their work is to help communicate about it as clearly as possible. So that's a little bit about me. In terms of what I'm passionate about right now, a lot of things. It's a lot going on in the world. It's hard to nail down just one, but there is a general feeling, I think, well, not a general feeling, but a general thread of the things that I've been spending a lot of my spare time thinking about, which is just a lack of connection between people and between entities and between systems, which I think has probably always been true. It's kind of a trite thing now to talk about silos and not connecting, but I think because of the way technology and society and work and a lot of other things have evolved over the past decade or so, I would say that we are now interpersonally experiencing those things we used to talk about at a systems level. And so I think I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about that lately.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that there's definitely more room to improve in how we're connecting. And in your background, you definitely have quite a broad range of experience in working with nonprofit leaders, social impact founders. And so I thought the social impact founder would be a great topic to dig into with you today. And I guess in general, what has your experience been like working with entrepreneurs and change makers and social impact founders, people who are trying to make a difference?
Yeah, I think working with other entrepreneurs and thinking through founding new organizations and starting new projects, I find what's always interesting is that sometimes folks think a lot about what topic they're most interested in, which I think can be very important. But I find that the most successful people that I've ever worked with are really passionate about what they do, more so than what the topic is. So in my lane, communications, right? The topics are pretty varied. Just in one day, I can work on a lot of different issues. But for me, what I really enjoy is the communications piece of it. And so a lot of the folks on this call are working on things that are really varied, right? So when you're talking about gamification or you're talking about technology with self-driving cars and other things like that, what is it about that work that really makes you tick? Maybe it's more than the fact of the pedestrian safety. Maybe it's about, other cultures and other languages that really excites you and then finding your way in that space. But I think it requires a great amount of self-awareness to be successful as a founder, because regardless of what the topic is, regardless of what you're working on, you have to know what it is about yourself that you're really good at and that you can replicate well, often in service of whatever your mission ends up being. So I found that the most successful people are like, I am really good at X. And so that tells me that regardless of what I'm working on, that's probably always going to be the thing that I'm good at. It helps them build stronger teams. It helps them know their blind spots. It helps them learn where they might have some additional learning to do, right? Which we all do. But I think without knowing what it is that what those gaps are for yourself, it's really difficult to then find success because you have a harder time bringing the right people along with you. You have a harder time positioning yourself to win the work that is most aligned to what you're good at. So I think it's something I've been reflecting on a lot because, in this place of thinking about connection and interconnection, I think a lot of it is based in a lack of self-awareness or a lack of importance that we place on self-awareness. And I think it's really critical interpersonally, professionally, and in most of our endeavors is to really know ourselves as well as we can, not because we are so in love with ourselves or so narcissistic about it, but because it makes us a better citizen, a better worker, a better founder, a better friend, a better any role that you put on it.
That's definitely a super great. That's a really great point, Dulari, around they're passionate about what they do and trying to identify what that is. It can be a challenge. I think for me personally, it has been in my own business.
And I think particularly in social impact, right, there are so many problems to solve. And just because I volunteer at the food bank doesn't mean that I'm less passionate about dogs in the shelter or issues with pedestrian safety or issues with interconnectedness globally. I'm interested in all of those things. And so pinning down an issue, some people have that, right? They know this is what I want to spend my life's work on. I think more people are likely to be passionate about a lot of things that are interconnected, right? And also have a difficult time narrowing down to just like one issue area that they want to work on. But I think what is maybe a more valuable endeavor in the shorter term is to think about like what am I really good at and how can I contribute myself to maybe a wide range of issues or to one issue. Either way, you're going to be a much more valuable participant in solution making if you know how you can apply yourself in a way that's really valuable.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for talking through that. And I guess that covers a little bit around the next question around common traits that you may have noticed among social entrepreneurs, but are there any others that you'd like to note?
Yes, there's a little bit of, I would say that common traits are probably in this lane of doggedness, I like to call it, just like a real dog with a bone sort of mentality of like figuring out what it is and really sticking to it because it's a challenging place to work in social impact, right? It's really difficult. Most things are not easily solved. Most things that we care about are not easily solved. There are individual solutions, there are system solutions, all of them feed into each other. And so that kind of patience and dog with a bone mentality can be really, really helpful when we're thinking about really intractable and deeply embedded problems in our societies. I think the other thing that I've noticed among social entrepreneurs who I really admire, including Liz and Ben, both of you on this call, is they've granted themselves permission to think about what could be more often than they think about what is. And that to me is like a really valuable set of lenses to put on yourself, right? Yes, we are working within systems. We obviously can't just run out and do whatever we want to do, but the ability to imagine what could be better and then work yourself backwards into like, okay, so then like what incrementally does that look like? And then can I bring that patience and that dog with a bone mentality to working towards this thing that I can now imagine is, I think, something that is really difficult and requires if you don't come by it naturally, which I am somebody that does not come to me naturally, it requires a lot of discipline to spend your time making your brain go there, right? Like I am given to pessimism. I'm happy to report that to all of you who may not know that about me. I am given to sort of feeling stuck. I'm given to sort of feeling very pessimistic about any number of things. And it requires for me to seek out people and community and literature and poetry and any number of things that help me see beyond what is current to what can possibly be. And then think about then, because of what I hope is a lot of work that I've done on my own self-awareness, then what does that mean in my life, right? If I can now imagine what can be, how do I apply my own self to those things in my day-to-day life, in my work with my clients, in my relationships with other people?
Absolutely. And I know I'd love to jump into the conversation around communications. I know you're an expert in this space and taking some time to dig into it. Yeah. Um, so how do you think clear communication plays a role in the journey of social entrepreneurs?
I think you gave me these questions in advance, so I just want to say for everyone that I knew that he was going to ask me this, and I'm still like, I don't know.
Okay.
Um, I think that because I felt it was difficult when you sent me this question, because I feel like communications, because this is my bias, it is everything, right? Everything about how we understand problems and how we think about solutions and how we explain solutions to other people, how we build campaigns, how we bring people along, how we ask people for their support and their help, how we ask people for money, which is a big part of solving problems. All of that to me is communication. And which is why I do what I do. For those of us who are not biased in this way, who do not think that communication is everything, I think that the first piece of it is that I've always loved the explain like I'm five sort of internet meme, right? I grew up, I'm old, so like the internet was first explain like I'm five started when I was really young, and I was always fascinated by that concept because I think most things can be drilled down to a concept that a 5-year-old can understand. I think it is and when it can't, I think there are still ways to get it to maybe 10 or 15, which is still like a pretty great way of thinking about how do we talk about complex challenges. And complex challenges are also something I've been interested in. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't work in social impact, I don't think. And so one of the ways that I think communications can be really helpful in social impact is when we talk about problems in a way that people understand, in a way that's taking something really complicated and making it really clear. And understanding a problem, I want to say, is like 90% of the way to the solution, right? And a lot of times we are throwing solutions at a problem that don't work because we didn't fully understand the problem. I think we've all been there, right? Like it might be like a home repair and you're like, I don't know, I keep on trying to do this thing and this problem still is here. And it's because you didn't understand that the leak was actually on the roof and not, in your kitchen or whatever the thing is, right? I am not a homeowner. I don't know why I use that as an example. I don't know what happens in a house, but I just think that the understanding of the problem part of the journey really benefits from clear communications, from people who can apply their knowledge and their experience to really understanding a problem, but then take that next step of explaining it to others in a way that's clear and that brings people along with you. So to me, that's where communications, I think, can play a really big role. And then obviously, once we have solutions, how do we get them out? How do we replicate them? How do we scale them? That to me is also where communications can play a big role.
Yeah, especially in the early stages. How are we talking to the customers? What are we telling them to bring them alongside us? I love that framing. So thank you. And do you have any
Yeah,
examples?
sorry, I just want to say in the early stages, but also as things evolve, right? Because as things change, sort of that discipline of continuing to communicate is one that I think like when we're launching something, it's like, yeah, a campaign, but then like as things go, I think that's typically where things fall apart is when we stop communicating because the early stage has passed, right? And so now we aren't bringing people along in a way that will be valuable to everyone involved.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And how about any stories or examples of any change makers are, that maybe you've worked with or you've seen who do this well?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So once again, I received these questions in advance and I had answers. Um, so I point back to Ben and Liz and the Uninc a lot because this is an idea that has evolved in a number of ways over the years that I've been working with you all to now being in a place where we can talk to people who are in school and help form some of the way, hopefully, that they think about moving on into the world, I think is a great example of that dog with a bone sort of mentality of like seeing this opportunity and like going for it and doing what it takes to maneuver within that space. So I always want to start there with you too. Um, I work with an organization that does some really great work, or we're trying to do really great work, is what I'll say. It's a think tank. And so a lot of what they produce is you just want to tear your hair out strand by strand, like not even in chunks. You just want one by one to just put. It is academic thinking, it is research-based thinking, but they also want that work to be featured in the New York Times for regular people to understand. And I think that's a really great example of an organization that understands the problem so well, right? They're writing these research-based, well-funded research that talks about problems in ways that are deeply detailed, are inclusive of what is true about most social issues, right? That they have a number of different things that are feeding into them. Um, but I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that I got to work with them because of another social entrepreneur who was like, you know what, like you need someone who is going to help you take this and make it understandable to others. And so when we talk about examples of what great social entrepreneurship looks like, I think it's that web building also. And so I use that example as like um, how do we bring and take others with us as we're moving through our work and we're moving through our careers? And then how do we also think about, again, in self awareness, like this other person also works in communications, taking really technical stuff and turning it into something that's not technical is just not their jam. That's just not what they do. They would love to take what I create and then go to the media, which is also not my jam. And so that self awareness piece comes back there when I think of that example of how things play out. And then I will say, I I'm trying to think of like a specific example. I have a friend who built a tech company here in Austin, actually called Funder, Fundr. It is a tech company. It is a software. It is an AI algorithm. But I would very much classify that work into tech for good because it does the really hard work of collecting all the due diligence about um, tech startups and presenting that information in an algorithmic way to investors that removes certain identifiers that sometimes cause bias in the investing ecosystem, right? So we are talking about what are the things that make a tech company successful. Typically, it's about the team. There are factors that investors look into around like how solid is a team? Are they bringing enough knowledge about all the different things that the company does to it? It's about scale, it's about customer acquisition, it's about how far the platform is, whether the tech is working well, what is the research that they use to build their tech, et cetera. You can have all of those things, and for lots of different reasons that I think we're all familiar with, sometimes you experience discrimination because of who or what you represent. But if we're just looking at the data, this seems like a great tech company that I should invest in. You don't know anything else. And so building, when I think about building for scale and building to solve problems that are complicated, I think about an organization like Funder and I think like, okay, like you've done something that really moves the needle. It also saves a ton of time for investors because it does all the due diligence that they would normally do through multiple phone calls, Zoom meetings, coffees, et cetera. All that paperwork, all that data is pulled into the system where you're reviewing that knowledge and then you're moving into fit with a totally different lens about that company, right? When you're thinking about investment. So that's one that I will also shout out as a way of thinking about solving problems um, that make it really convenient for other people to want to solve that problem as well.
Yeah, making it easy for them to understand, get involved, and
Yeah.
convenient. That's the word. Yeah, thank you. And do you have any other strategies or any other tips you'd like to share before we spend a little time in our journals?
Oh, I think there's a lot right now, and particularly because we're speaking with students. I think there's a lot right now around sort of global upheaval, right? There's a lot going on economically. There's a lot going on politically. There's a lot going on in our societies, militarily, however you want to think about it, all at the same time, which is a tough, potentially a tough time to be thinking about what your future careers, what your future passions are, right? There's a lot going on. I think I would offer I think I would offer about that when we're thinking about social impact, our basic human needs continue to be basic human needs regardless of what's going on in the world, right? Like our basic needs for connection, for shelter, for food, for all of these things. And so I think I would just encourage, more so than a tip, I think I would just encourage sort of that spirit of thinking about um, is your social impact sort of passion and direction and imagining factoring in that we all have certain needs and none of that changes regardless of where you were happen to be born on this globe. And there's a lot of work to be done in any of these spaces. And so what feels like potentially, I'm hearing a lot from other young people that like it just feels like a time of how will I know what even the careers will be in the future, right? And like that's fair. I don't know what the world's going to look like, and even next year. But I think when we think about social impact in particular, the basic questions that we ask ourselves about like what makes my life better, what makes my neighborhood better, what makes my state better, what makes my country better, what makes the globe better. You answer those questions, and any time that you're always going to be a powerful social impact founder or entrepreneur or participant, whatever that looks like for you in your job role.